Hello and welcome to The Little Simple Life, a podcast about living your most intentional, inspiring life. Stepping outside the box, walking your own path and living a life you dream of. I'm Amy, 30-something mum of two living just outside London. These podcasts are love notes from me, sharing the things I know I would want and sometimes need to hear. I've been a writer and a content creator for 16 years, and creating content that speaks not only to you, but to myself too, is something I'm so passionate about. Choosing a different life, a life that steps away from the status quo, a life that is both extraordinary and questions the norm, is so beautiful, but it also throws up a lot of questions. Am I doing the right thing? What do others think of me? It can also be the beginning of opening your thoughts to so much more. It is the beginning of a journey that starts with you, a question on your mind as well as in your heart. If you're here, I know you feel it too, that there is something more, that there is more than the life society tells us there is and that we should want for ourselves. You can choose a different direction. In these episodes, I'm going to delve into what it means to walk a different path, from educating our children outside the school system to living in a small home by choice, surrounding ourselves with a life of intention instead of living a life of default, and so much more. I welcome you to come on this journey with me, to open your heart and mind to a different way of living. Whether you're already walking your own path, are keen to make a change, or just want to learn a little more, I thank you for joining me. I hope you find what you are looking for with the words of these podcasts, and I hope they speak to you in your own unique way. You can find me over on Instagram at The Little Simple Life, where I share more about our journey, and if you too have an account there, I would love to connect with you. It can feel lonely forging a path that is different from the norm, but I just want you to know you aren't alone. You too can create the life you want to live. I would be so grateful if you could leave me a rating, a review, a share on social media, or recommend me to a friend who you think might like to hear these words too. Thank you so much for joining me here. On today's episode of The Little Simple Life, I'm going to be sharing a little bit about our journey into creating a life by design. So, what is a life by design? What does it mean to live an intentional, more inspired, mindful life? Well, I guess it can mean whatever you want it to mean. It can mean whatever is the most meaningful to you. I know that doesn't help, but don't worry, I am going to go into a little more detail. For us, it means living a life that we create, a life that we have designed, and not a life that society tells us we should live. We grow up being told what we should do: go to school, work hard, get good grades, go to university, get a good job, join the rat race, and use things such as houses, cars, holidays as evidence of how well we are doing in life. But nobody ever tells us to slow down or shares how we can really be happy. For us, happiness isn't things. Happiness is life. We don't want that. Not for us, not for our children. That generational cycle stops with us, and we're doing everything in our power to make sure that our children can live a different kind of life. We want our children to enjoy their childhood, all of their childhood, not just the moments they aren't in school following along with an outdated system. I probably should have warned you before now that I have big opinions, and I hope that this can be a space where we can share them together. This all started for us back when we became parents to our first child in 2019. We were living a good life. I wouldn't say there was anything wrong with it, but we were part of the rat race. And having a child kind of changed that for us, but not totally. When the pandemic hit in 2020, it forced us to slow down. It forced all of us to slow down. And I think if you cast your mind back to that time, if you're ready to, then I think it was a massive change for all of us. It enabled us to slow down. It enabled us to really think of what was important. All we cared about back then was the health of us, of our family, of our friends. We cared for their safety. We were so grateful that we had a home, a safe space where we could exist and where we didn't have to worry that we were going to be in danger. And that is a huge privilege. We were concerned about, how we would get the food that we needed, but we were safe. Life became a lot more simpler, and for us, it's never changed. There are so many things about the pandemic that have been so awful, and there are still times when I think back and I think, my goodness, I don't want to remember those times. But also, so much good has come from it for us, for our family. And there were really hard times. Financially, we've had difficult times through the pandemic, but we've come out the other side. But it forced us to slow down. It forced us to think about the things that were most important. It enabled us to retreat into our home and just embrace everything that we have and embrace a slower way of living. And it has been really wonderful. And it set us even more on this path to live in this more intentional life. We don't want to go back to the rat race. We don't want to put our children in school and send them out of our house and out of our care and put them in the care of someone else. No one is going to care and love on our children as much as we do. No one is going to care for their education as much as us. There are so many things in our life that make us feel like we are creating a life by design rather than that default life that society tells us that we should live. I'm going to go into so much detail in future episodes on some of these topics, if not all of them, and I'm more than happy to go into great detail on them. I have a lot of opinions and a lot of views, and I really do welcome you guys to join with me and share your own views on these things when these episodes come up in future. But I thought it would be helpful today to just start with some of the things, just an overview of the things that we do or the things that we are passionate about. So when it comes to our home, for one thing, that's one area that we really feel like we are creating this inspired, intentional and mindful life. We live in a small home by choice. And when I say by choice, it comes from a number of choices really. We live in a small home because originally that's all we could afford at the time. We've lived here 5 years. We live in leafy Hertfordshire. It's beautiful, but it's very, very expensive. And at the time when we purchased this place, we purchased to our almost maximum. And that's a life that I don't want to and I'm not prepared to live in future. We are 5 years in. We're in such a better position than we were then for so many different reasons, even though the pandemic was tough financially in some aspects. But we have this home, and now we could move if we wanted to. We could do the big upgrade. We could move into a bigger home, another bedroom, but we don't need it. We don't need it yet. We will one day. We have one boy and one girl, and I would love to give them their own space when they're older. But for now, it doesn't have to be. And so we choose to live here. We choose to stay here. We love our home. We love our space. It's not the biggest. It's not the fanciest. It's definitely not the showiest. But it's ours. And little by little, bit by bit, we are creating a wonderful home that we love. We're inspired by it. We're inspired by creating wonderful spaces around it and just being really creative with all the things that a small home offers. We could easily move to a bigger home, but I also think there's a lot of fun and a lot of joy in creating these small home hacks, just living in a space and making it work wonderfully for you. And I think because of that, our home has so much life to it. And I love that. Part of that is also living with less. When you live in a smaller space, you need less things. But when you live with less things, you start to realise that you really only do need the things that bring you the ultimate joy. We live in a society that is steeped in consumerism, and to live with less is almost radical. Isn't that crazy? That we are designed by the way society designs us to spend the money, sometimes that we don't have, to buy things that we don't really need, so that we can fill our homes with all of this stuff. It makes no sense to me. So living with less is something we've been embracing. Are we there yet? No. Will we ever be there? I don't know. Where is there? I think that's a really good question. I'm not a minimalist by any stretch of the imagination, but I am on a minimal journey and I'm enjoying it. And I'm going to go into that in so much more depth later down the line. We try and make eco choices in our life as well. And that comes from, I guess, as well, living with less. One of the biggest eco choices that we make is to be a one-car family, which I think you'll agree with me is quite radical in this day and age. We have neighbours here who have 2, 3, sometimes even 4 cars, and we live in a 2-bedroom home. That's crazy. But we make eco choices where we can, and we also aren't perfect, but we do the best with what we have. Like I mentioned about living minimally, something else that is really big in our life is a minimal life for our children as well. Whether that be in their toys, we have minimal toys around and we find that really, really works. But also in just what they're doing. They don't need to be rushing all the time. None of us need to be rushing all the time. I'm going to go into minimal toys and toy rotation and everything like that in a future episode, because it's something I talk about quite frequently on my Instagram account, and it always is a good one for discussion and debate, I find. Also around our home, we create intentional spaces, clear spaces, bright spaces. We are so very, very lucky in that our home is so bright. We have multitude of windows in every room. It was one of the things that drew me to this home in the first place. The natural light is probably second to none, and one of the reasons that I could not imagine moving from this home. Another reason why I could not move from this home is we live facing open countryside. Our views are beautiful, and while many people say that, it's not the be all and end all, there is something so calming and so relaxing just looking out over a sunset or a beautiful view. It is one of my favourite things about living here. And when it comes to our life, there are many different things that we are creating to live this life, this slower life of more intention, and just be mindful about where we spend our time. Time is our most important commodity. We can never get our time back. And so it's important that we spend our time on the right things. For us, it's about a work-life balance, a true work-life balance. The pandemic brought so many people home from offices and into their own homes to work full-time. Some people love working from home, some people hate working from home. But it does provide for many people a much better work-life balance. We're finding in our home, with my husband being home now full-time, he won't return to an office, that our work-life balance is so much better, and it has definitely helped us promote this slower way of life within our family. He still works a 9 till 5, but for a wonderful company, and again, that really helps with this work-life balance. I am currently on maternity leave after having my second child last May, but on the whole, I'm a freelancer and I create the kind of life I want within my work, and that's something that I intend to get back to, something that I can fit around my children. We want a life for them with no school, and that's something I really intend to get into depth on. in later episodes of this podcast. But we don't want them to have a life where they feel hurried and rushed, where they don't have to learn a prescriptive curriculum, where they can follow their interests and be creative. And that's something we are really passionate about, to give them this long, slow childhood where they don't feel rushed about any aspect of it. And something you might have realised from what I'm saying here is not rushing, and there being no hurry is a massive part, essential to our life. And while it's not always possible, sometimes we have appointments, sometimes we have to get places at a certain time, is to minimise that and to allow us to just live a slower life. A slower way of life is also, for us, an outdoor way of life. We love being outdoors. We also love being indoors though. And we have an allotment space where we are excited to be cultivating and growing and starting to live off our own land a little bit. Our small home is a split level flat. We have a balcony, a beautiful little balcony space where we've been growing and enjoying just our outdoor space for 5 years now. The children love being out there. Well, the toddler definitely does. I'm not sure the baby has spent much time out there yet. But our toddler definitely loves being outside. And she loves being at the allotment. Living off our own land a little and just enjoying learning and learning about the outdoors, learning about growing. It's an amazing space and I can't wait to see it grow and develop over this coming year. These things, they all go into part of creating this life by design that we love, that we want to live. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode, and thank you so much for all the support all of you give me on Instagram all the time. I appreciate every single one of you so much. Next week, I'm going to delve a little more into what it means to live an inspired life. I can't wait to see you then. And in the meantime, please connect with me on social media. I would love to know what you think of this first episode. Have a wonderful week, friends, and I will speak to you soon.